Okay, so today's subject is the problem of induction. This one is tricky enough that Tiger decided to get on board right from the beginning. She didn't want to miss a thing. And in fact, this is complicated enough that we're going to go through it twice. This video will be the problem of induction as presented by Hume. And in the next video, I will do the same logical concepts in a more modern interpretation due to Nelson Goodman. So let's get right to it. So uh, just to back up to where we are, for a couple thousand years, people who thought about logic thought that induction had some feature yet to be discovered, such that it could be baked into the rest of deductive logic, whether it be Venn diagrams or some logical symbol, some process that would then give it the same certainty as deductive logic. And its very name, induction, is rather than deductive. In is sort of, not or negative. So when we're using induction, we're right in the name. It's like there's something wrong here, and so logicians were searching for this. And in today's lecture, we're going to see why not only have we not found that yet, but we're not going to. That's the upshot of Hume's conclusion: is induction is fatally flawed, and it's baked right into how induction works, that it doesn't work properly. Hume himself, interesting character in his own right, was a man of letters from Scotland, and lived near Edinburgh for most of his life. But although he did a couple stints as the ambassador of England to France, where he was a welcome guest at all the greatest dinner parties. We know from letters written at the time that he spoke with an outrageous Scottish accent, and his French was although he was fluent in French, he had this extremely strong Scottish accent speaking in French. And nonetheless, he was a man of great wit and charm. Could really rock a frilly shirt, as you can see there, which is something that all of us can aspire to. He is today best known as a philosopher. His book, A Treatise of Human Nature, and some other subsequent works is just absolute canon in philosophy. But at the time, he wasn't all that recognized. In fact, he himself says his work, fell dead-born from the press. No one bought it. No one was too impressed by it. And so he actually turned to writing history as a way to earn a living. And his trick there was to write history from a neutral perspective rather than saying, write a history, because history up at that time had been a conservative writing a book explaining why all liberals are idiots, and then a liberal writing a book about all conservatives are idiots. And Hume said, well, why don't I write a book that says everyone's an idiot? And the genius of that was that everyone bought the book because they all wanted to find out what he said about them. He never got recognition in academia for his work because it was suspected he was an atheist. And then after he died, and he had some work that he wanted to be published only after he died, turned out they were right to be suspicious. He was not a believer. The Tiger's that's all she wants to hear about that. So the problem of induction. Hume, and he addresses a wide range of philosophical issues in his books, but this logical issue is one that he's very famous for. And he formulates this problem as a dilemma. So we did dilemmas last part of the course, so we can understand this. So he says induction and this is induction as a process. So as a logical system is justified either by reason, by the laws of thought, or by something we experience. He says, is it possible that you could see something that would justify induction? After all, lots of things that we believe because we experience them. And so Hume basically says this is the two ways we typically come to believe things, either because we think it through and come to a conclusion, or because we experience it directly ourselves. So that's a disjunction, either by reason or by experience. Then the first conditional, if by reason, then it's justified the principles of deductive logic, and that makes a ton of sense. And then if it's by experience, then it's justified by, and then Hume is kind of doing this Columbo thing where he says, well, I'm sure we'll just solve that problem and then we're all good, right? Because this is basically the very question of this fill in the blank here is exactly what solving the problem of induction is going to be. So induction is either justified by the logic that we know or by something else. Now, and we've gone far enough in induction to realize that that's not going to work out for us, right? There is nothing we've got in logic so far that is going to justify induction. So we're looking for some justification by something else. And here's the logical form. So we have a reason or experience. If it's reason, then it'll be justified by logic. If it's by experience, then it would be justified by the unknown thing we seek. So either it's justified by logic or by the known thing we seek. And we're essentially solving for that unknown. Now, why is it, backing up here a second, we've got either it's logic or by experience. How would we, if we got that disjunction and we will think it's one, then we would think it's not the other. So this Hume starts then essentially with a disjunctive syllogism by an argument that this is not going to work with logic alone. And he makes these comments, if Tiger will curb her enthusiasm there, that the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible proposition and implies no moral for crying out loud. Contradiction than the affirmation that it will be rise. We should in vain therefore attempt to demonstrate its falsehood. His point is that there's no logical reason why the sun won't rise tomorrow. The fact that it has over and over and over again is because of our experience. There's no logical, it's not logically impossible, there's no purely logical reason why the sun will rise tomorrow. And when we think the sun will rise, we're essentially reasoning in an inductive argument. We're saying, look, the sun came up going back to January 1st every day since, therefore the sun will come up tomorrow. And if you think, that's a pretty typical inductive argument, this is an enumerative induction, let's check to see whether it's a strong argument. Is the sample size large? Yeah, right? For some of us, the sun has come up years and years and years every single day. In fact, if we wanted to go back further and get data from other sources, it's been pretty consistent for, well, at least a recorded history, and we have good reason to think much longer than that. The sample size is obviously large enough. Is there any sort of bias? Is this, just me thinking that? Is it just you? No, it's everybody, right? It's even little Annie here who thinks the sun will come out tomorrow. And this is exactly how every inductive argument works, right? We say, I've seen 5 million crows on 5 continents and they're all black. we feel pretty good about thinking, therefore, all crows are black. The kicker of that one is that if I had been teaching logic hundreds of years ago, instead of saying all crows are black, I would have said all swans are white until Europeans went to Australia and found out that there were black swans there. And we had to think of a new example for logic. So the fact that, yeah, you've seen all sorts of crows, all sorts of places, all sorts, doesn't mean that your inductive argument is guaranteed. So Hume continues, every inductive argument relies on the presumption that what is unexamined won't be relatively different than what is already examined. When you're looking at crow after crow after crow, or sun rising day after day after day, you're counting on the world being pretty steady, right? Pretty naturally continuous with what you've already experienced. And I won't try to do a Scottish accent, but he did us the favor of actually writing in sort of a bit of a dialect. If reason determined us, it would proceed upon that principle that instances of which we have had no experience must resemble those of which we have had experience, and that the course of nature continues always uniformly the same. That's a lot of big words. Let's break that down a little bit. Hume basically says every inductive argument has hidden inside of it, to make it a good argument, that nature is uniform, that what is unobserved so far will be like what we have already observed so far. And what justifies this presumption? Well, so far so good, right? That assumption has always been baked into inductive arguments, and it usually works out. The fact that I say usually there should be a little bit of a heads up where we're going here. So now, uniformity doesn't mean, perfect consistency here. He doesn't think that all of the world is like, Saskatchewan, flat and undistinguished. Sorry if you're from Saskatchewan. What he means is that the regularities of nature will continue. The sun has been coming up, it will continue to come up. Crows have been black, they'll continue to be black. That when you wake up tomorrow, the laws of, because let's face it, now we know why the sun rises every morning is because of the way things are spinning. And we don't think the way things are spinning is going to change. We think that those laws of nature are going to remain continuous. And Hume calls this this hidden assumption, which is really the article of faith that our induction is based on. He calls it the principle of the uniformity of nature. This is what makes your past experience a reliable guide to the future. And it seems entirely natural to accept this, but as logicians, we should ask ourselves, what justifies it, right? We don't want to accept this just because it's been handy. We want to have, if there's a logical justification for it, that's what we're seeking. So, why do we think the uniformity of nature is a principle we should accept? Because nature's been uniform. And notice the similarity here to the sun will rise argument. Nature was uniform on January 1st, nature's uniform on January 2nd, nature's uniform on January 3rd, and so on up until today. So nature will be uniform tomorrow. And that is exactly like the sun will rise tomorrow argument. So, have we filled in the blank? Induction is justified either by reason or experience. If by reason, then it's justified by the principles of deductive logic. If it's by experience, then it's actually justified by that principle of uniformity of nature, but that is itself justified by induction. So induction is either justified by logic or by induction, and it's not justified by logic, so it must be induction. And so what do we have? circular reasoning. Induction works because induction works. Or in the past, the future has resembled the past, therefore in the future will resemble the past. And that's a lot, okay? So we're going to take another run at the problem of induction in the next video, which we'll call It's Not Easy Being Gru. And there's a reason why Kermit the Frog is blue in this picture, and you'll find that out next time.